The murder of Tyshawn Lee. Let's talk about it.
Chicago's neighborhoods, unfortunately, are feeling the effect of gang violence, the availability of illegal guns, and policies that are far too lenient on gun offenders. The murder of Tyshawn Lee, however, was something far more sinister. This was a targeted assassination by Dwight Doty, Kevin Edwards, and Corey Morgan. These are calculated killers whose actions define the words brutality and cowardice. Tyshawn was targeted and brutally killed in an alley because his father, Pierre Stokes, was a ranking member of a rival gang. His death was the culmination of gang violence that spiraled into a cycle of retaliatory violence fueled by illegal guns and absolutely zero regard for human life. Tyshawn was an innocent child betrayed by these three men, and sadly, he paid the ultimate price for gang violence, senseless gang violence, that plagued his neighborhood. Members of law enforcement often witness situations that no one should in their lifetime, and this case stands out front and center. In nearly 30 years of policing, I have never witnessed such a hateful act of treachery and savageness towards an innocent child whose life barely had the chance to flourish. While no conviction will ever bring back Tyshawn, we hope this development will bring some level of closure to his family and friends. State's Attorney Anita Alvarez will now outline some specifics of this case.
Thank you, Superintendent, Acting Superintendent Escalante, and the Chicago Police Department, and all of the law enforcement agencies represented here today, including the Cook County Sheriff's Office and the FBI. As you know, a second defendant has been charged with the murder of Tyshawn Lee. This defendant, Dwight Boone Doty, also known just as Doty, has been charged with the murder of Breonna Jenkins and the attempted murder of Deshari Bowens. A short time ago, my office proffered the following facts about this case, and I will read them to you now. Breonna Jenkins and Tyshawn Lee's deaths are the result of a gang war between a faction of the Black Peace Stones and the Killaward faction of the Gangster Disciples. There has been a history between the two gangs for a long period of time, but it came to a head as a result of the shooting that occurred last fall on October 13th, 2015. In that shooting, Tracy Morgan was shot and killed while he was in a car with his mother, who was also shot and wounded. Tracy Morgan is the brother of co-defendant Corey Morgan, who has also been charged with Tyshawn's murder. Shortly after the shooting, Corey Morgan stated that since his brother was killed and his mother had been shot, he was going to kill grandmas, mothers, and children. Morgan, Doty, and another uncharged co-defendant were all members of the Black Peace Stones, and they began going out daily, armed with guns looking to retaliate. At one point, Doty set up a surveillance of Tyshawn's grandmother so he could kill her in order to draw out rival gang members. He also stated that his original plan was to torture this child by kidnapping and cutting off his fingers and his ears. On October 18th, 2015, Breonna Jenkins and Deshari Bowens were seated in a car in the area of 78th and Honorary. Believing that Bowens was a rival gang member, Doty is alleged to have walked up to the vehicle and fired multiple shots into the car, striking and killing Brianna and also striking Deshari. Doty later stated that he did not even know who was in the car, but when he and an uncharged co-defendant drove by the car, he saw dreadlocks on Deshari and believed that he was a rival gang member. Doty later stated that after killing Brianna and shooting Deshari, that he reloaded the gun and carried it around. He was later arrested by Chicago police while in possession of multiple guns and charged with possession of those guns. The guns were tested by the crime lab, and one was found to be the murder weapon in the case of Brianna Jenkins and the shooting of Deshari Bowens. On November 2nd, 2015, Doty and the same two co-defendants were seeking further gang retaliation when they arrived at Dawes Park at 80th and Damon. They eventually saw 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee, who was in the play lot at the park. Tyshawn had gone to the swing set his basketball down, and was playing on the swings. Morgan and the third defendant left the play lot and drove away in an SUV, and Doty stayed behind in the playground area. Doty then picked up Tyshawn's basketball and began dribbling it a few times before giving it back to Tyshawn. He then asked the child if he wanted to go to the store. When Tyshawn said he didn't have any money, Doty told him he would buy him whatever he wanted. Tyshawn and Doty were then seen walking off together out of the park and into a nearby alley. Once they reached the middle of the alley, Doty took out a gun and shot Tyshawn multiple times at close range. This defendant was facing the child when he shot him. He later made statements that he had, and I quote, "Seen that bitch go in his head. And Shorty, he was like he couldn't take it no more. Shorty couldn't take it no more," unquote. This defendant also later stated that after he murdered Tyshawn, he wanted to go back to the park and shoot it up. The police, unfortunately, the police were already there, and he couldn't go back, and he should have killed all the kids in the park. After the murder, the three defendants are alleged to have gone to a Walmart where they purchased bleach and proceeded to wipe down the inside and outside of the vehicle before taking the vehicle to a location where they abandoned it. This defendant also stated that he had been working on a rap song in which he talks about his killing of Tyshawn Lee.
Out of respect for the families and the gangs of the streets of Chicago, I am not going to mention names, but I want to talk about the situation and try to shed light on how I see the situation of gang violence in Chicago. Now, I first want to say that my condolences go out to the families on both sides of this gang violence, because both sides have lost people that are very dear to them. And that's one of my main points that I want to make, is that people say that the gangs are shooting over territory and streets that they don't own. And that's not 100% true. A majority of the gang violence is driven by past murders. And people are identified by different neighborhoods that represent different gangs. So these people are out revenging the death of their loved ones. So it's not cool to just say, well, they are just shooting over blocks. They are not shooting over blocks. The 9-year-old child was not killed over blocks and neighborhoods. It was a revenge killing for other killings. Now, in a logical state of mind, you would say this is ridiculous to go out and shoot a child. And that's from a logical state of mind. But from the state of mind of a person that's involved with the gang wars, then there is no logic. You know, there's a saying that goes, all is fair in love and war. Now, a lot of people are upset because they say the child was killed and, you know, the child's life was very valuable. And I understand that because life is measured by how many years you're expected to live. So if a child is 9-year old and killed, they think, man, he has a whole long life ahead of him. He could live to 80 years old. Whereas if, you know, you're 60 years old, then, you know, you're looking at 80 years old. So it's a big difference in, you know, 80 or 90 years ahead of your life and maybe 20 years ahead of your life. So I do understand why people value the life of the children a little more. But here is my problem. I have children. So if a person kills me, my question to you out there that are watching this video is, if a person kills me, do they care about my children? Who will be there to care for my children if you kill me? So even though it's terrible to kill my child, and it would hurt me so, it's terrible to kill me also. It's terrible to kill anyone. All lives are valuable. So the idea that the child's life is more valuable than the life of the brother of one of the shooters, I don't agree with. I feel like his brother's life has value to him. His brother meant something to him. And you cannot say that the child meant more to the parents than the brother meant to the other brother. Also, you shot the mother. So when the mother is shot and the brother is killed, that brings a lot more into this picture besides it just being senseless, random shooting for no reason. And let me break down a lot of the mentality behind the vicious murders. What a lot of people won't admit in the city of Chicago is that these young people that are shooting and killing, many of them are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. They have PTSD, just like a soldier would have in a combat zone. If a guy, he's a gang member, and he gets home and he finds out you killed his brother and you shot his mother, I would think psychologically he would have some form of temporary insanity, and he would have some form of PTSD. So I really think that these situations should be looked at psychologically. And I've always said that in state government and in federal government, there should be a department of psychology and psychiatry. Because many of the problems we're facing are all across America have psychological things involved with it. It's psychological. It has a lot to do with the mind. So here in Chicago, aka Chiraq, we are dealing with a lot of youth that have serious psychological problems from past violence. It's a lot to see your brother dead. It's a lot to see your child dead. It's a lot when your sister gets hit by a stray bullet. It's a lot to see your little brother get hit by a stray bullet and now he's in a wheelchair. It's a lot to see someone break in the house and beat your grandfather half to death, and then you find out who did it. This could cause extreme cases of violence. Even though I'm a rational man, I live in a rational situation. No one has shot my mother. If a person shot my mother and my sister died and my mother was wounded, I cannot say how I would be thinking at that point. I am sure all type of thoughts would go through my head, much like a father that finds out that his daughter has been raped, or a father and mother that have found out their child has been molested. You cannot tell me at some points violence does not enter their mentality. So when you have people that are already gang members, already very fond of gunplay and fights, and then they suffer these terrible losses and have forms of temporary insanity and post-traumatic stress disorder, then it is natural for them to react in an irrational manner. It makes a lot of sense to me, even though it was senseless. It makes a lot of sense that a person, after their mother was shot and their brother was killed, they would look to shoot grandma's kids or whatever. For the sake of making this conversation more relevant, I'll bring up one of my own personal situations. I lived in California one time, and I met this woman, and we started dating, and her ex-boyfriend, who was the father of her 2 children, attacked me coming out of a reggae club and stabbed me and left me for dead. I couldn't walk for a year. I was brought to Chicago back in a wheelchair, and I had to pretty much start my life all over. The woman came with me and the 2 sons. And many days while I laid in bed, couldn't walk, very angry because I had never done anything violent to anyone else, and I just couldn't get over the fact that even though I've never been a violent person towards others, I never shot nobody, I never killed nobody, I never stabbed nobody, that somebody actually stabbed me. Because I was from the old school where we used to fight. So, if we had a problem, let's just fight and get it over with. But, it was the late 80s, and there was a whole new mentality with the crack era, and violence increased. So me coming back from Hawaii to California, I wasn't aware that the violence had increased like that, and I got caught up in it, and I got stabbed, and I had to come back to Chicago hurt. So I'm back in Chicago with the woman and the 2 children by the man that stabbed me, and many days I thought about killing the children because I wanted to hurt him for doing what he did to me, because in my mentality, he didn't care about my children. If I would have died, who would have took care of my 2 sons? I had 2 sons at the time. I had a daughter and 2 sons, actually. So who would have took care of them? So I used to look at them many days and say, I should throw them out the fucking window. I'm going to be honest with you. But because I knew the children and had a bond with them before this happened to me, I would always settle down. But I'm just telling you this to show you how the mind works. I mean, I was not in my right state of mind. It took me maybe 5 or 6 years to get back in my right state of mind after that violence occurred to me. And after that happened to me. So I can relate with the mentality of these people, and I think people should start looking at some of this violence from a mental point of view. That we're dealing with communities that are suffering post-traumatic stress disorder and long-term temporary insanity, if there is such a thing. And the reason I say temporary, because it can eventually go away, but who's to say how long this insanity will last after so much trauma, so much blood, and so much murder? So these are the situations we're dealing with in Chicago, aka Chiraq. We have a lot of violence, we have a lot of shooting, we have a lot of poverty, a lot of racism, where there's not jobs provided, and it's only provided for certain people to go downtown and make this money. We have a ruined educational system. We have a corrupt police department. And all of these things are adding to the gang violence. Many times you will see the mayor tell the black community that when something happens, they should tell, they should talk. At the same time, there's a code of silence within the police department. So this is the double standard that we have between the community and the police department. How is it you want the community to come forward, but yet the police have a code of silence and a no snitching ideology also? The police also believe in no snitching. So don't try to make it like no snitching is only within the community. And the only way we're going to fix the communities of the city of Chicago is it's going to take psychiatric treatment, and it's going to take counseling for those that have lost their loved ones. Because I'm sure the father of the child that was killed is having all type of struggles with not reacting and going back and doing something heinous himself. We need to be honest about this situation. And we also need to realize that it's best not to have wars and to try to stop the wars altogether, because all is fair in love and war.